and heavy snow move into portions of the east.
There are already accidents and slide-offs because of this heavy snow.
Today marks 50 years since the Edmund Fitzgerald sank in Lake Superior. We'll look back at the storm that led to the tragedy and the safety changes that have taken place over the last half century.
There hasn't been a sinking over 50 years, and there's a reason for that.
We'll help you better understand the atmospheric rivers impacting West Coast weather.
It's just a really elongated and narrow cold front that's pumping a lot of precipitation.
And a closer look at the role cloud seeding can play in modifying the weather.
From our nation's capital, this is the National Weather Desk.
Well, good morning and welcome to the National Weather Desk. I'm meteorologist Eileen Whalen. Well, it's looking and feeling like winter across much of the country. The coldest air since early last spring will impact tens of millions of people, and snow is in the forecast for many places. So the flakes already flying in Chicago this morning. The Windy City is under a winter storm warning, which is rare for November. Flakes could fall at a rate of 2 inches per hour as lake effect snow comes off of Lake Michigan. And it's also been snowing in portions of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Indiana, and Ohio. Most places are expecting just a few inches, and we'll take you to some of those locations in just a moment. But first, here's a look at the current winter alerts from the National Weather Service. We have a mix of winter weather advisories, winter storm warnings, and lake effect snow warnings stretching from the Great Lakes into northern New England. But where it's not snowing, it's just super cold. An Arctic blast is bringing frigid temperatures across the south and east. There are freeze warnings there across the south from Texas to the Atlantic coast. And temperatures in some places could approach record lows. Florida could even see 40s or lower. And right now we want to check out how the snow is impacting the morning in Indiana and Ohio. So we start with Kyland Hall, who is near South Bend, where a record-breaking 8 inches of snow fell Sunday.
So it's still very wet on these roads. We've been checking in with dispatch even as early as last night, and what we were hearing then is the same thing we're hearing now. There are already accidents and slide-offs because of this heavy snow that's still on the ground. Now, of course, on these busy main roads like where we're at in Mishawaka right now, on Ironwood and Ireland, of course, you're going to hear and see a lot more slush because, of course, there's been a lot more traffic running through those areas. But on those side roads and a lot of those county roads, you're still going to see blanketed snow yet to be pushed away, so be careful on those commutes. But even where it's wet, it's still slick, and so you're going to want to make sure to give yourself plenty of time to brake and plenty of time to make those turns.
Looking pretty good at this intersection here. You can see some accumulation in the roadways there, mostly in the in between where the cars have been there. So you may cause a little catch a little problem, maybe a little fishtail action if you have to make a left or a right through some of that accumulated snow on the roadways there. The key for you here is going to be preparation. This driver found her fuel door stuck there. Jessica Tynan had to use a credit card to pop it open. She says she's already been out on a 2-mile walk with her dog Moki this morning. She says she was surprised with how much snow there was, but says she is not intimidated, even though she's got to drive just about an hour to get to work this morning.
Well, speaking of driving, when it comes to winter driving, it is always important to remember that bridges freeze before road surfaces. Meteorologist Eric Kostriva explains why.
Now, of course, the roads heat evenly during the day when we get some sunshine, but with the cold air that's able to go above and below the bridges, that allows for those temperatures to start to go down quicker than what you would get from the roads that are a little bit more, as we said, insulated by the ground around them. So as a result, you see those temperatures over the bridge at 30 degrees. That's going to allow for some ice and potentially snow to develop on those, while the roads away from them and connected to them that are connected to also the ground have a much better grasp and better handle on the icy conditions potentially that could develop.
Well, for the second time in a week, a powerful typhoon struck the Philippines. The latest storm killed at least 4 people before moving into the South China Sea. More than 1 million people were evacuated before the storm's arrival. Now, the government says more than 100 villages are flooded. There have also been numerous landslides, and just last Tuesday, another storm killed more than 200 people in the Philippines. Well, 50 years ago today, on November 10th, 1975, the freighter Edmund Fitzgerald sank during a storm in Lake Superior. All 29 members of the crew died. Now, you may be familiar with the tragedy thanks to the song The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald by Gordon Lightfoot. It was the largest ship on the Great Lakes and is still the largest to have sunk there. Her final voyage was from near Duluth, Minnesota to Detroit when it was caught in a storm with hurricane-force winds and 35-foot waves. Green Bay meteorologist Phil DeCastro shows us what happened.
The approaching and strengthening storm would start to make its presence known. By 1 in the morning on the 10th, winds around the Fitzgerald as it worked out into Lake Superior had picked up to 35 to 40 miles per hour. Waves likely up around 10 feet at this point. Harsh conditions, but still nothing for a ship her size. And this was especially true since she was heading straight into those winds and the waves. It allowed her to really effectively cut through those swells. Keep that little bit in mind. Now, as she started to turn across the northern end of the lake, winds remained strong, seas still up at about 10 feet at mid-morning. Now, late in the morning on the 10th, the Fitzgerald would pass near the center of the area of low pressure. Now, this actually provided a brief break from the gales and from the high seas as the wind field shifted around. But now, the storm itself was actually exploding in intensity as it lifted off to the north and toward the Hudson Bay. So just a few hours later, winds had swung around to the northwest and they had picked back up to gale force, 25 to 45 miles per hour where the Fitzgerald was sailing. And even bigger problems were developing ahead of her because as the winds shifted to the northwest, it was pushing the biggest waves and focusing them down in the southeast corner of Lake Superior. This big open fetch of water here allowed the waves to build up energy and momentum over hundreds of miles. So by the time the Fitzgerald was getting down into that corner of the lake, well, it was dealing with winds that could have been reaching over 80 miles per hour at times and constant waves that were getting up over 20 feet high. And these waves were also now broadsiding her as they moved from west to east. That's a much more dangerous situation than meeting them head on.
Well, changes over the past half century have made shipping on the Great Lakes much safer than back in 1975. Brendan Kinney continues our coverage from northern Michigan.
Design criteria is in place to make a vessel more survivable, allowing the crew more time to recognize there's a safety concern and get off the ship. The U.S. Coast Guard implemented stricter training requirements for crews. They need to know where life-saving devices are and how to launch them and use them. Immersion suits are now a requirement for vessels to carry on board. They protect against hypothermia. There are requirements to carry distress beacons that can float on the surface of the water. Travis and Brendan also point to advancements in weather forecasting the past 50 years, giving crews advanced warning to stay away from storms.
Do you think a ship built today could withstand the storm that the Edmund Fitzgerald was going through?
That's a tough question. I would say that yes, for a number of factors. One, it's going to be loaded less conservatively. It's going to be built more survivable. I think even if something happened where it didn't survive, there's enough safety that safety's built in.
Travis points to a free-fall lifeboat aboard the Mark W. Barker. This is the first U.S.-built Great Lakes bulk carrier in nearly 40 years. Travis's firm was the principal designer of that freighter. He says you get on the lifeboat, push a button, and crews are safely taken off the ship.
There hasn't been a sinking over 50 years, and there's a reason for that. I think in part due to some of the improvements in design standards and operational standards that were implemented at that time.
Well, after more than 200 years of predicting winter weather, planting schedules, and recipes, the Farmer's Almanac has announced that the 2026 edition will be its last. Now, the annual guide has been printed every year since 1818. Now, the old Farmer's Almanac, which is a separate publication with a yellow cover, is not shutting down. Well, with about 3 weeks left in hurricane season, there are no new threats forming in the Atlantic, but that doesn't mean you should let your guard down. Just last year, there were 2 tropical storms as well as Hurricane Raphael in the month. And since 1851, there have been 50 November hurricanes, but just 4 have made landfall in the U.S. The last was in 2022. Well, coming up here on the National Weather Desk, how cloud seeding can change the amount of precipitation. But first, how atmospheric rivers deliver all that moisture to the Pacific coast.
I'm meteorologist Ryan Munn. Let's get a look at the Northeast. We head through the day on Monday. We are talking rain, especially for much of New England, as we are going to see a storm system move on through. This is 1 p.m., and you can see much of northern New England, especially in Maine. We are looking at some steady to maybe heavy rain in some areas. Then you head off to the west. That's where we have some snow showers. Colder temperatures off to the west will move in as we head into the day on Tuesday. The high temperatures for the daytime today will run in the 40s and 50s.
I'm Chief Meteorologist Gerard Jabali. Here's a look at the Mid-Atlantic region. A strong system pulling away from the area. This will lead to some much colder temperatures. With that, the wind will be up, and we could even see some mountain snowfall likely as we move through late Monday, even a few flurries up and along the Mid-Atlantic region. We will be talking about the colder air lingering around as we get into Tuesday, so temperatures will struggle. We'll be stuck in the 40s for highs on Tuesday afternoon, and even in the 30s to low 40s on Tuesday.
I'm meteorologist Vetus Reed. Here's a look at your southeast forecast highs for the day. It looks like we're going to see those temperatures at 39 degrees, a chilly start up there, looking at 50 in Raleigh, 47 in Macon, Atlanta, 39 degrees, definitely cold weather. Tampa's looking at the 60s, but we had a strong cold front that pushed through. That's going to continue to keep things pretty much clear. We do have some snow showers over the upper elevations of Kentucky and Tennessee, so it looks like they can get a few snowflakes, but that system will continue to rack out, but we'll get dry, clear conditions for the remainder portion of the week.
Weather Window, presented by the National Weather Desk.
As temperatures plunge already across the eastern half of the nation, it already looks like winter on New Hampshire's Mount Washington. Rochester, New York has cold winters too, but this morning the region enjoyed a magnificent sunrise. And morning rain in Seattle gave us these beautiful iridescent clouds. The pastel colors come from a diffraction of sunlight through water droplets and ice crystals.
Listen to Off the Radar, winner of the National Headliner Award for Best Information Podcast.
Well, last week, the Pacific Northwest saw heavy rain, and it was brought on by what's known as an atmospheric river. Seattle meteorologist Shannon O'Donnell explains how they work.
So what exactly is an atmospheric river, and where did this term come from? Well, it started really coming into use in the 90s in academia, and then in the 2000s kind of jumped into the mainstream and the lexicon for the rest of us, and especially with social media, it's really taken off. It's kind of like a big river in the sky. It's just a really elongated and narrow cold front that's pumping a lot of precipitation across a long stretch. Sometimes it goes thousands of miles. Very good at transporting a lot of water vapor and then depositing it in one place, and especially when it's rooted in the subtropics, it can mean trouble. Let me show you what it looks like. When we have an atmospheric river coming here to western Washington, it looks a lot like this. Big high pressure hanging out off of Cape Mendocino in California, and that forces this rain train to extend deep into the Pacific. That's Hawaii down there. And when we start pulling in precipitation from 20 degrees north and it hightails it all the way on up to Seattle and Vancouver, BC, that by the time it gets here tends to be some really warm rain. This is an atmospheric river that's not coming straight across the Pacific because they can do that too, but this is the special kind that goes all the way into the subtropics. It is sometimes called the Pineapple Express around here. Sometimes I talk about this on social media, and a nice analogy is that all bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon. That is similar to how these Pineapple Express style atmospheric rivers work. They are a specific type of atmospheric river that pulls a lot of precipitation from the subtropics. When they occur in, say, January in western Washington or Oregon, when we have a ton of snowpack in our Cascades and our Olympics, you get a lot of melting up there. It pours in the mountains instead of snowing. It melts all of the snow. It's still raining in the lowlands too, so all of that combined can make to a big flooding mess here.
Well, we have hit that time of year where the days are getting shorter. So to understand how much daylight we're losing and the reason behind that loss, let's turn to Green Bay meteorologist Audrey Lee.
We've officially hit the stretch of the year where we're losing daylight fast. And since our clocks just fell back an hour, those early sunsets are hitting even harder. Here in Northeast Wisconsin, we're losing about 65 minutes of daylight in the month of November. But September and October were worse, where we lost nearly an hour and a half of daylight. Now, December, that's when we see a little bit of a turnaround. We start to only lose about 12 minutes of daylight. But then once we get into the new year, by January, we start to gain about an hour of daylight back. Now, it's all because of the Earth's tilt, which is what gives us our season. This is the time of the year the northern hemisphere tilts away from the sun. Now, winter solstice happens on December 21st of this year. That's when we start to see the sun shining most of its rays over the Tropic of Capricorn, which is the line south of the equator. This is also where the farther north you live, the more daylight you lose. That's why some places like Alaska or even near the North Pole can actually see up to 24 hours of total darkness this time of the year. Now, for the southern hemisphere, they're actually seeing the exact opposite. They're actually starting to approach their summer season while we start to move closer to winter. These darker days can take a toll on many. It's one of the reasons some people experience seasonal affective disorder, as the lack of sunlight can impact your mood and energy. But once the winter solstice arrives, we start to gain that daylight back, and it will be here before you know it. We just have to make it through the next 6 weeks until brighter days start returning.
Well, many people see their electric bills climb this time of year because of increased use from things like home heaters. Meteorologist Violet Skybor has a closer look at how the weather impacts your home energy costs.
Let's look at a typical electric bill. The first quarter is usually from things like the dishwasher, TV, oven, lights, dryer, and fridge. Although the oven section might be a little bit larger, especially in New York State, where gas stoves and ovens are now being banned. So they're putting electric ovens in place now, and that may add a little bit more to your bill. Looking at the larger chunks here, though, your water heater takes a big chunk of your bill, but the largest chunk is actually from heating and cooling, which is why the temperature outside plays a big role in your bill, and also a big chunk from everything else, depending on what else you use your electric for. Looking at the temperature, though, energy consumption versus air temperature. Right when we're around room temperature, between 60 to 70, is when we use the less electric to heat or cool your home. The hotter it gets, obviously more AC you have to use. Cooler it gets, the more heating you have to use. A good tip, though, is that on warm days, right before a cool down, open up your windows and let your house heat up a little bit before that cooler period so that you can save a little bit of money on your heating bill. I hope this helps.
Well, being able to modify the weather might be nice to help keep those bills down. Today, many places use cloud seeding to increase precipitation. Arena Plunkett tells us more.
Predicting the weather isn't an exact science. There's a little bit of uncertainty with some of these models.
The models are going all over the place. Stay tuned. We'll fine-tune it.
But with the recent strong storms, online discussion about whether or not the government controls the weather has taken over. Reno Desert Institute research meteorologist Frank McDonough says while scientists are not controlling the weather, they are influencing it with a process called cloud seeding.
Cloud seeding is just a real simple way of introducing some dust in the local atmosphere to create more ice crystals.
It's a technique that's been around for more than 60 years, seeding the clouds with a chemical called silver iodine to make precipitation. On average, the DRI estimates they can increase the snowpack between 5 and 10%.
20,000 acre feet of extra snowfall, if that runs off and comes down here into the valley, it's enough water for about 100,000 houses or more. So it's it's big. It's a lot of water.
For the driest state in the country, McDonough says cloud seeding is essential.
You have more probability of having water restrictions in your neighborhood. Building would probably have to be more limited. Farmers would have less ability to grow crops. Animals would have to compete with humans for water resources.
However, according to Earth.org, critics of the method raise cautionary flags around the practice, citing potential chemical hazards towards the environment and wildlife. Despite scientific studies deeming the use of silver iodine safe, skeptics question the lasting effects of increasing precipitation on our climate.
Well, time now for a short break, but first we take to the skies with a flock of wild flamingos.
Well, a very good Monday morning, everyone. I'm meteorologist Andrew Buck-Michael. Pretty quiet weather across most of the Midwest, especially the plains. But across the Ohio Valley and lower Great Lakes, we do have some scattered snow showers kind of working their way through throughout the day today. A couple sprinkles or flurries tomorrow with a quick little clipper. But look at the temperatures there across the plains, back in the 50s and 60s. Warming up a little bit more for us tomorrow. And by the time that we get to Wednesday, more sun for all of the Midwest.
Good Monday morning. I'm meteorologist Joe DiCarlo. Look to forecast across the region and a lot of clear skies, but it's cold out there. Temperatures in the 20s and 30s. That's a freeze across North Texas and Oklahoma and Arkansas. 30s into the 40s as you work towards the Gulf Coast. It's going to be a cool day today. Temperatures in the 50s and 60s. Plenty of sunshine across the region. Another cold start on Tuesday, but then we're starting to warm up a little bit. 60s and 70s for your Tuesday afternoon.
Hey, good Monday morning, everybody. I'm meteorologist Stella Sun. High pressure will be keeping most of the West Coast dry, though there will be a few spotty showers towards the Pacific Northwest, and there will be gusty winds with high wind warnings through portions of the northern Rockies near the Glacier National Park. Daytime highs will be climbing to the 70s in Denver and in Reno. We're talking 81 degrees in Las Vegas later today, 55 in Jackson, Wyoming, and in the 70s from San Francisco to Los Angeles and 84 in San Diego.
I'm Sarah McCoy, meteorologist at KRCR News Channel 7 in Redding, California, and you're watching the National Weather Desk.
Well, with daylight loss comes colder temperatures, and you might be surprised to learn that your ceiling fan can actually help keep you warm. Meteorologist Lindsay Storrs explains.
It's the time of year when you need to flip the switch on your ceiling fans, the one that's right there on the side of the base of the fan. In the summertime, you want that fan blowing counterclockwise. That pushes the air down from the fan and gives you a little bit of a wind chill effect, making it feel cooler in that room than it really is. But in the wintertime, if you flip that switch, your fan will move clockwise. That pushes the air up, which catches the warm air trapped up above the fan, pushes it down the walls to where you're at near the ground. This makes the room feel warmer during those colder months when that air gets trapped up high. You want to push it down.
Well, we'd love to share your weather content on the air. You can find us on all your favorite social media platforms, including Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Just search the National Weather Desk. We'll be right back. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm meteorologist Eileen Whalen. Make it a great day, and we will see you back here tomorrow.